Today we're diving into a topic that sparks arguments in therapy rooms, men's groups, and even quiet late-night conversations. Ignoring a woman might be the best way to attract her. Now, before you jump to conclusions, I want you to really sit with what this means, because this isn't about manipulation, games, or trying to punish someone with silence. It's about something deeper, something psychological, something I've seen play out countless times in my work as a therapist. Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you're here because this topic isn't simple. It pulls on emotions, expectations, and the roles we think men and women are supposed to play. And the truth is, many men come to me confused, wondering why giving more attention, more effort, and more reassurance seems to push a woman further away, while stepping back somehow pulls her closer. It feels contradictory, it feels unfair, but it's real. And it happens far more often than people admit. When I discuss this with clients, without ever sharing their personal details, of course, I often see the same pattern. Men try to fix, chase, or over-explain. Women, on the other hand, become overwhelmed by emotional pressure. What looks like rejection is sometimes simply overstimulation. What looks like distance is sometimes a need for breathing room. And what looks like ignoring from the man is, in many cases, the first moment a woman has the space to feel her own desire again. So when I say ignoring, I'm not talking about coldness. I'm talking about non-pursuit. I'm talking about letting the moment breathe, giving someone the space to choose instead of crowding them with attention. That space and that calm, grounded distance often reveals more truth than any long conversation ever could. In this video, I'm going to break down why this happens, why it feels so controversial, and why sometimes stepping back is exactly what brings clarity, attraction, and emotional balance back into the connection. Let's get into it. 1. Why pulling back sparks? Curiosity. There's something fascinating about what happens when a man stops chasing a woman. I've watched it unfold so many times in my work as a therapist that I could almost predict the moment the shift begins. And it's never dramatic, it's never loud, it's subtle, almost invisible, but powerful enough to change the entire emotional dynamic between two people. When a man steps back, even gently, something happens on the psychological level. It creates a pocket of silence she isn't used to, a space where his energy used to be. Suddenly, there's room for her thoughts to echo a little louder, and in that space, curiosity is born. I've sat across from men who told me they felt guilty for needing space, guilty for not constantly proving their interest, but what they didn't realize is that space is often what allows a woman to start feeling again instead of just reacting. I remember countless moments in therapy sessions when a man would tell me, "I stopped trying so hard because I didn't know what else to do." And almost every time something changed on her side soon after. She reached out more. She started conversations instead of waiting for his. She noticed his absence in a way she never did when he was always available. The shift wasn't because he became colder. It was because he stopped crowding the emotional room. Attraction has a rhythm. When one person leans too far in, the other often leans out just to breathe. It's human nature. We protect our space when it feels invaded, even if the invasion comes from affection. When a man pulls back, especially from a place of calm self-respect rather than anger, he breaks the cycle. He gives her the space to feel her own longing without pressure. And that's where curiosity begins. Not from ignoring her as a punishment, but from letting her genuinely wonder about him again. Curiosity is one of the strongest emotional sparks in human connection. It makes her reflect on moments she overlooked. It makes her pay attention to things she once took for granted. She wonders why you're quieter, why you're not always available, why you seem more centered in yourself, and that wondering opens the door for attraction to breathe again. I've watched women in therapy describe this shift from their perspective. They weren't upset because he stepped back. They were surprised it affected them. It made them reevaluate the connection. It made them lean in a little more. Not because he played a game, but because he finally stopped trying to force something that needed space to grow. Pulling back, when done from a grounded, honest place, isn't manipulation. It's creating room for curiosity. And curiosity often becomes the spark that brings two people back toward each other naturally, without pressure and without fear. 2. The psychology of space in attraction. If there's one concept I wish every man understood earlier in life, it's the psychological importance of space in attraction. So many of the men I've worked with over the years believed that staying close, being available, and proving their interest every moment was the path to connection. They weren't acting out of desperation, they were acting out of sincerity. They genuinely cared. But caring too loudly, without giving space for the other person to respond, often creates the opposite outcome of what they want. Space is not distance. Space is not punishment. Space is not a tactic. It's a psychological environment where two people can feel themselves again. And in every healthy dynamic, both individuals need that environment to think clearly, to desire freely, and to show up honestly. I've seen this play out in therapy rooms more times than I can count. A man comes in confused, saying he's done everything right. He's supported her, reassured her, texted her consistently, and tried to be the perfect partner. Yet something still feels off. She becomes quieter, less responsive, or emotionally distant. He interprets it as rejection. She experiences it as pressure, and both people feel misunderstood. Attraction needs oxygen. When a man fills every moment of silence, she never gets the chance to feel her own pull toward him. When he jumps to fix every concern she mentions, she never gets the chance to regulate her emotions on her own. When he rushes to close every gap, she never gets to step forward voluntarily. And that voluntary movement, her choosing to engage, to reach out, to respond, is where genuine attraction lives. Psychological space allows a woman to reconnect with her own internal emotional signals. It's in that quiet that she notices whether she misses you, whether she enjoys your presence, whether she feels calm or anxious around you. Without space, everything becomes noise. Her emotions get mixed with your anxiety, your expectations, your pace. Space gives her room to feel only her emotions, and that clarity strengthens attraction, not weakens it. I've had women in therapy describe it perfectly. They say they feel overwhelmed when someone tries to be emotionally present every second, not because the man is wrong, but because the constant closeness doesn't match their emotional rhythm. They need moments of solitude to understand themselves. And when they have that, they come back more open, more connected, and more genuine. For men, understanding this is powerful. Space is not losing control. It's not indifference. It's security. It's self-respect. It's giving the connection enough room to grow naturally instead of trying to force the pace. When you allow psychological space, you're not pushing her away. You're giving her the freedom to come toward you. And that freedom, more than anything you could do or say, is what makes attraction feel stable, mutual, and real. 3. How overattention creates pressure. One of the hardest truths men struggle to accept is that too much attention can actually push a woman away. Not because attention is bad, and not because women don't appreciate care, but because when attention becomes constant, it stops feeling supportive and starts feeling suffocating. I've watched this unfold countless times in therapy sessions, and the pattern is almost identical no matter the age, background, or personality of the man sitting across from me. Most men don't give too much attention because they're needy. They do it because they're trying to show good intentions. They believe that consistency equals security. They think, if I stay present, she'll never doubt how much I care. But what they don't realize is that this constant presence removes the natural rhythm that attraction depends on. There's no space for her to feel anything on her own because he's filling every emotional moment for her. I've had men tell me they texted back immediately every time, planned every date, filled every silence, and kept the conversation alive even when it was clear she wasn't putting in the same energy. They thought they were helping the connection grow. But from her perspective, it created emotional pressure, a pressure she couldn't articulate without hurting him. So she slowly withdrew, not out of disinterest, but out of overwhelm. Overattention makes her feel like she has a responsibility to match your energy, even when she isn't ready. It makes her feel like she must respond, must stay engaged, must reassure you, must meet your pace. That responsibility becomes a weight she never asked to carry. And eventually, she associates that weight with the relationship itself. When something feels heavy, the natural reaction is to step back. Women have shared this feeling in sessions with me. They weren't ungrateful for the man's kindness, but the constant attention didn't give them room to breathe. It didn't give them time to miss him. It didn't allow attraction to build naturally. They felt rushed emotionally, even if he wasn't trying to rush them. Intent doesn't erase impact. For men, this can be painful to hear. It feels personal. It feels like your effort is being punished, but it's not punishment. It's simply human psychology. When someone gives us more energy than we're prepared to reciprocate, we instinctively retreat to regain balance. Over-attention creates an imbalance even when the man's heart is in the right place. That's why giving less attention isn't about playing games. It's about removing the pressure that makes a woman feel responsible for your emotional state. When you stop trying to constantly fill the space, something interesting happens. She finally has the chance to step toward you voluntarily. She reaches out because she wants to, not because she feels obligated. And that shift from pressure to freedom is what transforms attraction into something real, steady, and mutual. 4. When distance helps her notice her feelings. There's a very particular moment in relationships that I've watched unfold again and again, both in early dating and long-term partnerships. It's the moment when a man steps back, not as a punishment, not as a game, but because he's tired, overwhelmed, or simply unsure. And suddenly, the entire emotional balance shifts. I once worked with a couple who illustrated this dynamic perfectly. Without giving any identifying details, I can tell you that their situation is one I've witnessed in many different forms over the years. In their case, the man had been the one carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. He initiated most of their conversations, planned their time together, checked in frequently, and tried to be the emotional anchor. He didn't see it as overextending, he saw it as love, commitment, and effort. But he reached a point where he felt drained. Not resentful, just exhausted. So he softened his approach. He didn't disappear. He didn't shut down. He simply allowed himself to stop trying so hard. Within a week, something fascinating happened. She began asking more questions. She initiated the conversations he used to start. She paid attention to his mood, his silence, his presence. She had space to feel the shift, and that space changed everything. This is a dynamic I've seen in countless relationships. When a man is always present, always available, always emotionally filling the room, a woman doesn't get the chance to notice the small things, how much she enjoys his company, how much she values his presence, how she feels when he's quiet, or how she feels when he's not the one initiating everything. His effort becomes part of the background noise of the relationship, comfortable, expected, and unintentionally taken for granted. But when he steps back in a calm, grounded way, something inside her awakens. She starts listening to her own reactions instead of reacting to his. She notices the absence of his energy. She wonders why he's quieter. She becomes aware of her own longing, something she couldn't feel before because his emotional presence was always right there, filling every gap. I've seen women describe this realization in sessions. They didn't understand how much they depended on his consistency until it softened. They didn't recognize how much they valued his steadiness until the rhythm changed. And they didn't realize how strong their feelings were until they finally had room to surface. Distance, when used intentionally and respectfully, helps her reconnect with her internal world. It gives her space to choose you instead of simply receiving you. It moves the relationship from a pattern of habit to a pattern of conscious desire. When she begins to notice her own feelings, without pressure, without expectation, without someone steering the emotional tempo, that's when attraction deepens in a genuine, healthy way. 5. The power of emotional neutrality. There's a certain strength men rarely talk about, especially in relationships: emotional neutrality. Not apathy, not coldness, not shutting down, true neutrality. It's the ability to feel your emotions without letting them control your actions. And in relationships, this subtle stability can shift dynamics more powerfully than any dramatic gesture. I've watched this happen in many couples I've worked with, and one particular situation always comes to mind when I explain it. A man came into therapy feeling completely overwhelmed by the emotional ups and downs of his relationship. His partner was expressive, passionate, loving, but also quick to react. He cared deeply about her, but every time she became anxious, upset, or confused, he absorbed those feelings as if they were his own. He tried to soothe her, fix her worries, anticipate her moods, and prevent any emotional discomfort from happening. He became reactive because he was constantly trying to calm the emotional storms he thought he was responsible for. Eventually, he hit an emotional wall, not because he stopped loving her, but because he lost his own center. During one session, we worked on something simple but transformative, letting her emotions belong to her while staying grounded in his own. He practiced responding instead of reacting, listening instead of fixing, breathing instead of rushing to solve. And slowly, he stepped into a calmer version of himself, one that wasn't shaken by every emotional wave that came his way. Something changed in their relationship almost immediately. She noticed the difference. She felt it. When she became upset and he stayed calm, not distant, just steady, she didn't escalate. She settled more easily. She didn't feel alone, she felt supported. The neutrality in his energy created a grounded space where she could process her emotions without feeling judged or abandoned, and it made her more drawn to him. Why? Because emotional neutrality communicates safety. It tells her, I'm here, but I'm not losing myself. And that balance is incredibly attractive. It's the difference between a man who feels overwhelmed by the emotional climate of the relationship and one who remains steady even when things get loud or confusing. I've heard women describe the experience in ways that surprised even them. They said things like, he didn't match my frustration, he didn't panic, he didn't argue, he stayed calm, and it made me feel grounded too. They weren't asking for perfection. They weren't asking for emotional silence. They were drawn to the stability he offered, a stability that was missing when he absorbed everything she felt. Men don't realize how magnetic neutrality can be when it's genuine. It's not emotional distance, it's emotional maturity. It's the quiet confidence that allows her to feel her feelings while trusting you won't fall apart. And in that trust, attraction strengthens more than any words or gestures ever could. 6. Why non-pursuit feels more confident. There's a moment in almost every man's life when he realizes something surprising. The less he chases, the more naturally things fall into place. It's a moment that can feel confusing at first, especially for men who grew up believing that effort is the only proof of interest. But attraction doesn't always respond to effort. Very often it responds to confidence, and confidence is expressed clearly through non-pursuit. Non-pursuit isn't ignoring someone. It's not silent treatment. It's not punishing her with distance. It's simply choosing not to center your entire emotional world around her reactions. It's the ability to stay grounded even when you want her attention. And the reason this feels so confident to a woman is because emotional self-control is far more powerful than emotional intensity. I've seen this shift countless times in therapy. A man comes to me drained because he's been trying to manage the rhythm of the connection. He initiates most conversations, responds instantly, adjusts himself to her moods, and constantly tries to prove he's worthy of her interest. He believes he's being supportive. But underneath all of that effort, he's anxious. He's afraid of losing her. He's afraid of silence. He's afraid of slowing down. And anxiety, even when hidden, is felt by the other person more than most men realize. When he learns to step back, not out of frustration, but out of emotional maturity, his energy changes. He isn't waiting for a text with tension in his chest. He isn't analyzing how much she likes him. He isn't adjusting himself desperately to match her pace. He's simply living his life, staying open to the connection without gripping it tightly. And women feel that shift deeply. I've had women describe it in therapy without even realizing what they were noticing. They say things like, he feels different lately, or I can't really read him anymore, but in a good way, or it seems like he's more sure of himself. What they're responding to isn't mystery, It's calmness. It's the energy of a man who doesn't need constant validation to feel secure. That quiet steadiness pulls them in far more than over-effort ever could. Non-pursuit signals that you trust yourself. It shows that you're not desperate for her approval. It shows that you're willing to let things unfold naturally rather than forcing connection through constant attention. And confidence built on grounded self-worth is one of the most attractive energies a man can project. Men often fear that non-pursuit will make them lose a woman. But what usually happens instead is that she starts showing up more intentionally. She reaches out, she engages, she invests, not out of pressure, but because your energy gives her room to desire you on her own terms. Non-pursuit feels confident because it communicates a simple message. I value you, but I also value myself. And that balance is exactly what makes a connection feel healthy, steady, and deeply attractive. 7. When ignoring becomes healthy detachment. There's a point in almost every man's emotional journey where he discovers the difference between ignoring someone and detaching from unhealthy patterns. And that difference is what brings peace, clarity, and confidence back into his life. I've seen this turning point in many of the men I've worked with, and it often becomes the moment they finally regain control of their emotional world. Healthy detachment doesn't mean shutting down, becoming cold, or pretending you don't care. It isn't about punishing her or making her feel insecure. Instead, it's about stepping back from the habits that drain you, overthinking, overanalyzing, over-pursuing, and over-investing in someone who isn't meeting you where you are. It's the moment you stop tying your emotional well-being to someone else's responses. I once worked with a man who came in completely overwhelmed by the dynamic he was in. He cared deeply about the woman he was seeing, but he was constantly adjusting himself to her moods. If she pulled away, he chased. If she became distant, he reassured. If she seemed confused, he tried harder. He wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to keep the connection alive. But in doing so, he lost himself. He could no longer recognize his own wants, needs, or boundaries. As we worked together, he practiced something simple, letting things be. Not ignoring her, but not chasing her either. Not pushing for clarity, not filling the silence, not trying to fix any emotional gap that appeared. He detached from the idea that he could manage her feelings and instead focused on his own. And the moment he did that, the entire dynamic shifted. She noticed the change. She felt the stability he had reclaimed. She leaned in more, reached out more, and engaged from a place of genuine choice, not obligation. His detachment didn't push her away. It created a healthier rhythm that allowed both of them to breathe. The relationship no longer felt like a tug of war. It felt like two people deciding, separately and together, how they wanted to show up. That's the power of healthy detachment. It frees both people. It gives her space to notice her feelings without emotional pressure. It gives you space to reconnect with your sense of self. It removes the urgency, the tension, and the fear that often come with chasing someone who hasn't made up their mind. Men often worry that detachment means losing someone, but in many cases, it's what finally allows the relationship to function in a balanced and meaningful way. When you're able to stand firm in who you are without needing to control or be controlled, you create the conditions for real attraction, safety, stability, and emotional freedom. Healthy detachment isn't about ignoring her. It's about connecting to yourself first. And that connection becomes the foundation for everything else that follows. Stepping back isn't about games, punishment, or trying to manipulate a woman's emotions. It's about creating space for clarity, desire, and emotional balance. When men stop chasing and start grounding themselves, everything shifts. She has the room to feel, to choose, and to recognize what she truly values. And you regain your sense of self instead of losing it in the pursuit of connection. Ignoring, when rooted in healthy detachment and emotional stability, becomes a path to calmer, more authentic relationships. Attraction grows naturally when both people can breathe, reflect, and show up by choice, not pressure.